a lot of warriors have teched in recently to have a better chance against Priest. It's greedy, but it's not necessarily greedy with big threats. The value, I think, can run out in this list. So honestly, I'm just very curious to see in this new world with Mutinous and Kresh in either player's decks, how this can affect the Priest versus Control Warrior matchup. Does the Priest still just demolish things, or is the added value with addition of Cthulhu enough to take the win?
It's a question that definitely remains to be seen, but if the warrior is in Alan's lineup, you'd have to assume he tested it at least against the regular priests and felt that he came out favored. I'm not sure if this priest is necessarily the one he was hoping to run into, though, because as we see from Glory and Eternal Practice partners, Alan870806, they are running the N'Zoth version with the Light Shower Elementals, and that's a bit greedier, right? There's more top end that the warrior doesn't necessarily have removal to get through every single one of those boards. Magtheridon helps a bit, but Alan is not running his own Rattlegore to go for a pressure game plan. So he has to be very picky with how he uses his resources. And right off the bat, we're already seeing South Sea Scoundrel and Mutinous in the opening hand for Glory.
Oh yeah, this is premium. It's not like the Control Priest mirrors where if you go all in on the Scoundrels and ignore tempo, things can get a little bit shaky because they can just tempo you out of the game with Sethix or something like that. Against Control Warrior, there's very little to be afraid of. They have extremely limited ways to develop any kind of a threatening board. And so, honestly, for Glory, the idea of just going South Sea Scoundrel into Mutinous and then raise deading both of them and not playing any other minions along the way, it's something you could consider. It's not out of the question just because of how greedy you can get away with being in this matchup as the Priest.
I think it's a very strong game plan. I'm not sure it's to the point where he would skip Wandmaker on 2 in order to narrow the raised dead pool.
Right.
But Mutinous is very strong in the matchup because Alan is running all these greedy top-end cards, right? The Ysera, the Silas, the Crush, and the South Sea Scoundrels, and Magtheridon. Mutinous gets enormous when that happens, and Glory is just skipping the Wandmaker, you'd have to think, in order to narrow the raised dead pool for the heavy hitters.
Gia, what has happened to my beautiful region? We were once so pure. We played minions on curve, Glowfly on 3 for 7 minions, and now Glory is not playing a 2-mana 2/2 on curve. I don't know what to say.
It's a whole new world. It is a new meta, Derek, at least for APAC. We just turned into Europe with the mini set. It's not that it's new cards per se, but we are approaching a different philosophy to the matchup, for sure. Alan is the first to play down a minion. Of course, the Scorpid is not very high threat at all, especially with no Vol'jin in this list to potentially pull out an early Rattlegore. So Glory is not hard-pressed to remove that immediately. Gonna start with the Scoundrel, and there's already a lot of premium options if he wants to eat them with Mutinous.
Right, because Silas Darkman, you can kind of predict they're not going to be able to, or sorry, they're not going to want to play it for a while, because Silas Darkman does not have a discrete purpose in this matchup, but you would have to imagine that getting rid, stealing Light Shower Elemental would be pretty high up on the pecking order of what you want to use that Silas for. And so, as you said, for Glory, there's a reasonable chance it sticks around, you chomp it up with Mutinous, res it with the Raised Dead, chomp something else. Whew.
And because Alan will be aware of the possibility of the chomping, I don't think this armor vendor is coming down at any point in the game until Alan feels it absolutely necessary. The annoying thing for Alan is that Glory, while he did just develop a 5/5 to die to the poison, is not of a size where Alan could swing into it and get the card draw rolling. Because I do think if Alan just waits too slowly in this matchup, there's no chance, right? Because Glory can generate more and more value from the raised deads. And Alan needs to get to his Cthulhu win condition sooner rather than later.
The one thing I will say for Glory at the moment is that if his plan is to go for Mutinous and then res, he does need to be afraid of hand space because he's at 8 at the moment. And in this matchup, 9 cards is very often the max hand space you can have, because otherwise your opponent plays the South Sea Scoundrel and you overdraw one. And I think given that Glory can assume he's in a pretty good position overall, he just wants to make sure he doesn't overdraw N'Zoth. As long as that happens, he should be in a fine position. And so he's just going with the Raised Dead now, saying this is good enough, let's get another one online.
Raised Dead for 1 minion. I think it's very smart to not get overly greedy here. Like you said, the N'Zoth is super relevant. So even though he'll only get 1 chomp with the Mutinous for now, he's got, after this turn, you'd have to assume 2 Scoundrels in the Raised Dead pool, and every Raised Dead he generates here on will still be very powerful. Alan can take this as a chance to draw with the Outrider's Axe if he, like, say, Shield Slams first or Kargath Primes, but these are all very useful resources, right? The Shield Slams are premium to deal with Glory's individual threats a little bit later on.
I kind of like getting Kargath Prime played and dead. Like, I know there's not many ways when it's on board that they can stop it from activating. But even with all that said, just getting it played before they can chomp it, I think is pretty important, right? Because any extra card in the deck, like Kargath Prime, that delays fatigue for a turn is a huge deal.
But is this about delaying fatigue? I'm pretty sure Alan does not win in fatigue versus Priest. It's more about drawing to Cthulhu and getting that online, if I were to guess. Obviously, this matchup is not one many people on ladder would have too much experience with, but the players did have access to the cards a little bit earlier than the rest and will have been aware of this and possibly tested on the tournament realm. As for Glory, he does have Kargath of his own as an option here, but I don't think he particularly wants to give Alan like a premium weapon swing target.
Come on, Hearthstone. This is going to take long enough already. Let's be helpful here. Ooh, Focused Will is interesting, of course, because he knows that there is a Kargath Prime in his opponent's hand, but as you correctly put, maybe denying the fatigue is not that important. So just extra value off of Idol of Yashaj is the more important factor.
Could be, or even Shadow Word Death in terms of just having a single target removal, whereas Hysteria is the only one right now, but he is going for the Idol of Yashiraj, like he said. It's very clunky. I am worried about Glory's hand space, but I think his game plan is very much just saying, I'm going to out-tempo Alan before he can get to his Cthulhu.
Seems that way. Glory very cleverly as well, just dumping out for 0 value the Wave of Apathy because of exactly this card. Again, the South Sea Scoundrel. Now he's at 8 cards, draws to 9 if the Scoundrel is played, and then 10, so he won't overdraw. But whether or not you actually play this is, again, a bit of a tough question from Alan. How important is it to, I don't know, get some value out of these threats? I'm trying to think of a way that you can actually push some kind of pressure in this matchup.
Yeah, I think it's just for the body mainly that he's playing it, because again, Alan is not trying to fatigue Glory necessarily, trying to get to his Cthulhu, and he's able to stick this 2-2, sorry, the 5-5 while swinging into the 2-2 and continuing to draw. But now Elucia enters as an option for the South Sea Scoundrel, which is a very cool thing you can do, is the double Elucia turn, but maybe not with this amount of mana from Alan. So he's going to go for Scorpid instead. Actually doesn't swing here, so maybe I do have to reevaluate. Is this not actually, or is it actually a fatigue matchup? I kind of think Alan doesn't get there with Glory having so many raised deads and additional value generation. I think that he needs to draw towards Cthulhu.
I think you're right. I think that he doesn't win in fatigue, but the thing is that, again, Cthulhu is not a game winner in this matchup most of the time. They'll have too many minions on board for you to actually get lethal, I find. Cthulhu is like a fatigue assister. You need often them to take a little bit of damage in fatigue maybe, and then Cthulhu can swing things even if you are 2 or 3 cards behind in fatigue. So I can fully understand why Alan is taking this slow, going for that fatigue game plan. Because, again, Cthulhu will be either a premium removal piece or deal that 15-20 damage to face that can assist him along the way to fatigue.
That's a good point. And very possibly, oh, that's a lucky outcome for Glory. One Thief stays intact. Very possibly Alan is not deciding right off the bat whether he's playing for fatigue or not. It could very well be that the matchup extends for a while, and depending on your position as warrior, whether you're under too much pressure or the priest has gotten too many extra value generations from their raised dead, that you can decide whether or not you're supposed to keep drawing towards Cthulhu or if you can kind of wait it out. But the discovery of War Cache is huge if he is planning to just outlast Glory this entire time, which again feels like a tall order because of Mutinous, but for now, Alan is keeping pace. He's under very little pressure.
Yeah, the War Cache is absolutely huge. That can try and keep the value train rolling. Again, he does not know that Mutinous is in hand. There's a card that's been sat around on the left-hand side, but honestly, there's a bunch of cards that have been sat around for most of this game. So I guess you're never going to get too much more information. But if Glory can snipe the Kargath Prime here, it would be a big deal in, again, denying that fatigue capabilities of his opponent.
Alan choosing not to play the Kargath and instead shield slamming, you'd have to imagine because he doesn't necessarily want the Kargath in the deck just yet, and also doesn't want to go too wide on board and give Glory like an easier clear with his resources. It's all about squeezing out any extra value you can get. Glory eats up the Silas instead, which he knew was in hand from the Southeast Scoundrel, but that's obviously the less impactful of the two options.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a miss there from Glory. But Alan does now pick up Southeast Scoundrel. So again, he's like ahead on board because you probably want to look at trading away the Scorpion here just to play around Hysteria from your opponent. But after that, just going Southeast Scoundrel into War Cache, or I don't know, Scoundrel into Kargath. You're again walking into Hysteria at that point.
Could even just be hero power because Glory is essentially forced to dump some more cards, right? Because if he goes to that crucial 9-card breakpoint in hand, like you talked about, the Southeast Scoundrel can begin to overdraw. And so at the moment, Alan doesn't need to actually play anything here. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Oh. Okay, well, Alan himself is at 8 cards, which is why he wasn't forced to play a Scoundrel, but now we see Glory with his own Scoundrel has that conundrum of how to end up with only 8 cards in hand because the Scoundrel would have drawn him even more. And that probably means Kargath here.
Yeah, you would think so.
Wow. Irela for 0 value. It's not as though there's any big boards he needs to sweep up with this AoE, but both players being very precious about their Kargath, I'd imagine only playing it when it can immediately die so that it's not silenceable or some other generated effects to make sure that it doesn't get into the deck.
Yeah, I think for Glory as well, again, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but my theory would be there's quite a few ways that you can actually copy Kargath in this deck, especially if you generate spells off of Sethic. If you were to get either Psych Split or Gift of Illuminance, both of those would be pretty powerful effects, honestly, to use on the Kargath to get 2 primes in the deck and again delay that fatigue.
Pretty good outcome as far as Idol of Yasharaj goes. That Light Shower Elemental, I would say that healing is not super relevant here because at this point in the game, whether Glory is at 10 or 25, the warrior probably cannot kill him. But it's still a minion with taunt, so Alan, if you at some point wanted to keep swinging face, is not allowed to do so. And it's too much damage for Alan to just leave on board every single turn, so we're going to see the another Shield Slam come down here.
Yeah, the only question here for Alan is, do you want to make hand space at the moment for the War Cache, or do you just want to keep chilling, which he clearly is very happy to do. Plenty of removal still in hand, so under no threat of being out-tempoed in this, well, early game, I'll still call it now, for Alan. And so I can respect just holding on. There's no need to develop aggressively here.
And if we were talking about possibilities to copy Kargath, Glory's not going to have more mana than he does right now, but possibly waiting for another palm reading to get the Apotheosis even cheaper and have the most mana flexibility with the Sethic. So it turns out he's tossing the Samuro here instead of Light Shower Elemental. You'd have to imagine because the Light Shower is his biggest threat at the moment, and doesn't want to play it unless Alan unveils a threat of his own.
Well, here we go. That's the second of the Cthulhu pieces played, right? We've seen now Eye and Heart played out. And I think very correctly for Alan, you are making sure that you play the Cthulhu pieces the second you draw them so that there's no possibility of Illusha being used to rip them and destroy the Cthulhu combo.
In terms of what Glory can dump now, if he was willing to throw out just the Samuro last turn and the Zyrella, obviously he doesn't care about AoE. I wonder if he cares about just Silas as a single target sort of removal here. Again, there's no Rattlegore, so I don't hate the idea of playing that, but it does get a little bit better with things like Crush. So it's going to be the Light Shower Elemental for this turn. He has seen 2 Shield Slams. Alan does have this third one, so it's not as though the Light Shower is safe. But again, Glory is just waiting to make room for the Southeast Scoundrel.
So for Alan, if he were to go Shield Slam Warcash, that would bring him up to 9 cards, I believe. So he would need to then dump something in addition if he wants to go for that game plan. He probably is just going to go for remove it and pass, I would guess. Or maybe even just straight up pass. But just always considering when does that Warcash come into play.
I think probably not until Alan has seen all the South Sea Scoundrels or possible ones from Glory. Against all odds, available from this card, but not necessarily good here because, again, Glory has just thrown away all his removal. The Shadow form is what's interesting to me here because that allows him repeated removal. Sort of over a couple turns because he's obviously not hero powering for very much, but okay, he does end up taking the against all odds. The heal hero power does become useful later on, I will say, when things get to fatigue or Cthulhu territory, but Glory simply took the against all odds in order to dump the card immediately because he doesn't want to draw it with insight.
So strange. I mean, not drawing with insight, I can obviously understand. And Shadow Form is a really weird card because once you enter a fatigue state, it's kind of worse, even though they're roughly equivalent. Like healing for 2 versus dealing 2 is kind of the same. But if you're the one being attacked, then healing often extends your game longer than just attacking your opponent will. So I can understand why he would rather just keep the heal intact.
Already 3 Cthulhu pieces played for Alan, only missing the Maw now. And that's going to be a bit scary for Glory because currently doesn't really have that many good ways of pressuring Alan. He has Hysteria here just as a clear to dump 2 cards at once, right? We could have seen him just use Shadow or Death, but I think he's more interested in having this hand space so he can finally play his Scoundrel. Alternatively, to go for the Sethek turn and try and discount or copy Kargath like you were talking about.
Okay, Brightwing just for the old max value.
Exiliax?
That's not going to activate? Yeah, I don't see that working for a while. I mean, late game, that could actually be pretty good, right? 7 healing is definitely not a terrible effect.
Potentially. Not the worst one to get, for sure. And at worst, it's just a dumpable card for Glory.
What now?
Because right now, Alan is the one that is supposed to dump some cards in order to play around Scoundrel.
Yeah, and at this point, it's in order to play around double Scoundrel, I think you do need to be afraid of, because again, Raised Dead has a chance of resurrecting one of the Scoundrels. Okay, Glory just literally throwing it down as a 7-5. I guess if you, again, you need to keep those hand spaces down in order to play around the South Sea Scoundrel. It's a good a card as any to get rid of because he's banking on getting a slightly more impactful Sethek Veil Weaver turn, you would have to imagine.
Yeah, still looking for second palm reading in order to get that renew free, ideally. Alan here committed to really not drawing off the Outriders Axe, which goes to show that he has penned this as a fatigue matchup, or at least partially with the help of Cthulhu, like you were talking about. The weapon charges can also be a bit significant later on after Cthulhu, right? Being able to push that last couple bits of damage that's sometimes lacking. But Glory is deciding to pull the trigger here. Apotheosis, Renew, even smite his own guy, just looking for Psyche Split for that Kargath Prime or Gift of Luminance like you talked about.
Yeah, you'd have to think so. And okay, the Idol of Yashaj is not bad. Initiation, not terrible either. This is just a big minion. And even though it looks like he is going to have to go up to 9 cards here, it's still a worthy turn, I would say, just to get this extra value.
But this is the go signal that Alan was waiting for. Bladestorm can kill off the Sethek, and then he can go Southeast Scoundrel to overdraw 1 card from Glory.
You'd think so, right? Okay, here we go. Getting the overdraw. Again, I think you probably pick here anything that isn't N'Zoth, and then hope that N'Zoth is overdrawn.
Yeah, I like the sound of that. He has only one Brawl, and so he can deal with one N'Zoth board, but in the worst case scenario where it gets raised dead or somehow returns to the hand, you just want to give Glory as few possible chances of playing repeated N'Zoths, because that's the way that Priest can win in Fatigue this matchup. Wandmaker Overdrawn is not a huge deal though, so Alan, a swing and a miss there, but he has gotten Glory way deeper into Fatigue.
Yeah, in the one turn where Glory did go up to those 9 cards, gets away with it, although it was a little bit scary for a while there. I mean, now, again, the options just widen up drastically for Glory. He could go for Idol of Yasharj into Shadow Word Death just to get back down to those lower number of cards in hand.
Yeah. In fact, it looks like he's dumping 3 cards here, or potentially not even the Idol. Oh, okay. Holding back on it. I wonder if he's trying to get specifically that saved for what will be Kargath Prime a bit later in his deck, because that's a way to gain armor and offset Fatigue a little bit. These matchups go so deep down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's just interesting to see Hearthstone when you're under literally no threat whatsoever, just trying to build this perfect value machine out of these, this deck full of removal spells and unoptimized cards like that for a control matchup.
All the threats are in hand and not on board.
Yeah.
Well, Condemn is definitely a dumpable card, you have to imagine, if he was willing to throw out Zyrella and Samuro for no AoE value. He can go for Kargath plus Initiation here to get the second Kargath. That's one way of copying it, even though it's like negative tempo.
That's pretty cute. I like that. Again, there's very few silence effects. He knows that Alan has a Soul Mirror, so you are giving him an extra card to shuffle into his deck, but you get the Kargath played and you stay below that threshold of 8 cards.
And crucially, if Alan does go Soul Mirror here, then Glory has 2 shots at Kargath Prime from Idol of Yasharaj.
True.
Which, I guess they don't have anything to immediately rush into, but he has seen 2 Shield Slams and a Blade Storm and a Coerce. Alan's removal is not unlimited.
Yeah, it's that awkward factor that Kargath Prime only gains you the armor if you kill a minion. Not just whenever you attack with it. So if you're just slamming face, well, it's obviously nice to get all that damage when there's the Bulwark in play already. Kargath Prime here is not that different from just a regular 10-10 instead.
I think Alan is considering whether the Soul Mirror should be saved a bit later on, because there will be 2 primes in the deck for Glory if he goes for that here, right? Alan does have his own primes to try and swing into them, so it's not the end of the world, but again, he has to account for what am I going to do about the N'Zoth board? What am I going to do about possible second N'Zoth board? There's so many additional layers of value you have to consider from Priest, and you are not working with perfect information because Glory can generate so many things off of Raise Dead, Renew, Scorpid, Sethic. It just goes on forever and ever.
Raise Dead found. Now with Alan at 8 cards, if Glory is able to hit one of the Southsea Scoundrels, we could, of course, be looking at a potential overdraw on this turn, which you have to be thinking is very tempting. But Glory does not like that game plan and literally just full passes.
Saying his Raise Dead pool is not good enough. Again, the only relevant thing for Glory to overdraw from Alan here is currently the other Cthulhu piece, I would say, maybe Kargath Prime. But it's not as though he was anywhere close to guaranteed getting second Scoundrel, so maybe he's just trying to get Kargaths into the Raise Dead pool and gain armor to offset fatigue and Cthulhu damage that way.
Okay.
It's the best idea I've got, Derek. I don't know.
It's as good a one as any. This is a weird matchup. I mean, this is just uncharted territory for APAC casters as well. I think I'm breaking out in hives already, having to watch a match go for more than 15 minutes.
Lucia is a card that is basically unplayable in this matchup because it would net Glory 1 more card closer into fatigue, and he knows that if Alan has drawn the last Cthulhu piece, then he is always going to play it the turn that he gets it in order to play around Lucia. And as it stands, Glory's hand has a lot more cheap and dumpable cards compared to Alan's.
Yep. That makes sense. I think that's only one of 2 minions left in the deck. I think it's actually just Kargath and N'Zoth left over now.
I'm not actually sure which of those Glory would prefer to get because, again, it's very unlikely the Kargath would kill a minion and gain the armor, but you just want to stuff the Raised Dead pool with as much value as possible, which means a second shot at N'Zoth is super relevant here. Alan, with that Magtheridon that he's running, Bladestorm going to wake it up and then kill the Kargath Prime. It's also just of a size where Kargath Prime on its own from Glory cannot straight up kill the Magtheridon.
Yep, something else going to need to be found here, which we know Soul Mirror is available, if nothing else. Or just swap it and steal it with the Silas Darkmoon is pretty interesting as well.
That is interesting. I think I'm looking at that, but wondering what the implications for Raised Dead would be. I guess at this point, the pool is too wide for Glory to really curate that he gets something relevant like Scoundrel or Kargath Prime or N'Zoth into the pool.
Yeah, I mean, already his Raised Dead pool has all the 1/3 Magtheridon acolytes as well, so like it's pretty filthy. Someone's peed in that pool, I think, at this point.
New card for Alan is the Crush entering the hand. I don't think it's particularly relevant in this matchup because Alan is very healthy with the armor total, not under much pressure. It's all just about how many N'Zoth's Glory can actually play. Currently, only one. If he Raised Deads at 2, and Alan can deal with both those boards with the double brawl that he's held on to. So it's really just kind of earmarking resources. Does Alan have enough 1-for-1 threats here? And for each Kargath Prime, Alan has his own Kargath, Shield Slam, so it looks like Alan could get over the line. So what comes off these renews is very important. Not the greatest options though. Soul Mirror is where my head's at, but it's not value.
Yeah, Focus Will is very dumpable, which you're looking at, I think, quite heavily based on how Glory has played this game so far. But Soul Mirror is, of course, just a strong card in the matchup, make no mistake, because there's still quite a few threats from Alan. If he can clear the hand space, there's the dragons from Ysera, Kargath, Kresh as well, of course, in addition to just Cthulhu that is still waiting in the wings.
I do think the period for dumping cards as Glory has already closed because he has seen the double South Sea Scoundrels from Alan, who is not capable of generating additional ones. And so it's really just working with the cards that Glory has left. It's these 10 plus the 3 in the deck.
Oh! I know what Glory's saving the South Sea Scoundrel for. He's going to rip Cthulhu from his opponent's deck, right? The turn is when it's shuffled in, because if he draws it straight away, then he can go for Mind Render to try and delay it for a turn, but if he leaves it in deck, then he can get his own Cthulhu. I don't know, there's some spicy stuff that can happen here, I think, for Glory.
There definitely is. Yeah, the best Elucia can do to Cthulhu is just delay, because obviously you have the mana to play it and Cthulhu in the same turn, but with the Scoundrel, there's possibility of overdrawing it, but again, Alan has not really left himself at 9 cards or more this entire time. Alan double checking what's left in Glory's deck. I'm sure their deck trackers are very, very polluted with all these additional cards with a little gift icon.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what, our deck tracker is not happy with what's been happening this game. I'm not going to bother showing the remaining cards left in deck because I think it's a bit messed up. But I'm pretty sure the 2 remaining cards at this point are Draconic Studies and N'Zoth available to Glory, which is a huge amount of value to have crammed into the bottom 2 cards of your deck. It's just about how do you find the time to play them and when do you play them, because N'Zoth is not only a big threat in its own right, it's an umbrella. It's your primary defense system against Cthulhu. Once they play that, if you play N'Zoth, Cthulhu doesn't even scratch you, basically, because you have too much health on the board. You have the Light Shower Elementals as well. But when is too late? What if they just fatigue you and then deal the full 30 damage? This is a very, very difficult puzzle for Glory to navigate.
And it is mathematically solvable, so we hope that the players have gone through these iterations before. It's also crucial to note that Glory now has a Crush in his pool, which is not guaranteed to be resurrected by N'Zoth because of the Scorpids, but would obviously be a better outcome because that's more armor.
Bladestorm I respect because the double Kargath Prime, he knows that single target removal is likely to be more valuable, but what do I know? He's literally just deleting his Scorpid straight away. 6 mana do nothing this game.
Yeah, for Alan, he still has to be afraid of South Sea Scoundrel. Glory, the same is not true for him because he's seen both from Alan.
Yeah.
So just staying at 8 cards, no matter what the cost. Stage Dive would have pulled him other Kargath Prime, right? So it doesn't really dump a card from his hand.
I'm out of cards.
There's no way to draw that piece in Glory's hand either. I was wondering if he could go Mind Render and then draw a card to hope to get the Cthulhu piece for 2 or less mana, but not going to be available. Glory just letting rip with the Dragon, though. Mage Scribe is usually the most tempting here, of course, for extra value, but it's just that hand space that's letting him down. So absolutely Plagued Proto Drake is a lot of health in play, which at least, again, makes things more difficult for that N'Zoth, for that Cthulhu.
I honestly think the Mage Scribe was reasonable because he could have played it and then a spell, and then it's not like there's any cards left for him to overdraw.
True.
So he can stay at 10 by that point. I feel like Glory needs more shots at Raise Dead, something like that, to really be able to offset Alan's value, right? More so than just a random 7 drop, which you'd assume the first half of whatever dragon gets removed immediately.
Well, here it is. First point of fatigue already for Glory, with still 3 cards left in deck for Alan. There's still, as we've been saying, that South Sea Scoundrel and the possibility to steal Cthulhu from the list. Still too early to call. In all honesty, this is going to be a very, very close affair.
Even if Glory does manage to copy the Cthulhu from Alan, it's just not getting there. Alan's at 78, right? It barely even removes the armor from Alan.
That's true, but at the same time, if we factor in the health of minions, then N'Zoth helps a lot. But of course, Alan has saved these brawls very deliberately to be able to deal with that N'Zoth.
And so it's really all about what comes off of the Raise Dead from Glory. Can he get some type of miracle outcome from second N'Zoth or like a Plague Proto Drake? I don't know. He just needs more than what's in hand right now.
Does look that way, doesn't it?
Right now, he doesn't have to blink necessarily because he'll be very aware that Alan certainly has the brawls in hand by this point, almost certainly. And if Alan doesn't do anything about this 5/5, then Glory is just pushing the 5 per turn.
Nothing really worth copying with Gift of Luminance left. I mean, Kargath Prime is kind of funny as a 1/1 gaining you 10 armor, but still I don't see it being especially impactful.
I think it had potential to be impactful with Raise Dead, but again, Glory just doesn't know what he's going to get. The Soul Mirror there to answer even just a singular Cthulhu or Ysera or Kargath from Alan, I suppose. But I feel like Glory needed something a bit more ambitious because I don't see him like outpacing the Cthulhu by this point.
So the fact that it's a final card Cthulhu piece, which Glory can know pretty much 100%, because Alan would just slam any Cthulhu piece down, the more specifically here being very good, without a moment's hesitation. I just don't think there's anything he can do to make that worth it. He doesn't have the Outrider's Axe in play, so he can't swing and then play the Cthulhu piece.
Not seeing it. Well, for Alan, this is the turn where there's only 1 more card left in deck, so even if he stays like at over 8 cards, it's technically okay. Not ideal that he didn't get immediately a way to deal with the 5/5, but I think his armor should keep him safe. Even against that persistent damage, as long as he gets the Cthulhu down.
Kind of weirdly bad for Alan that he got a 5 attack 4 drop, because now he can't go Cthulhu piece and then swing into a minion to kill it, to draw it instantly. Which then means that Glory will still be able to get the Cthulhu. As you correctly put, the fact that Glory gets the Cthulhu may not even be a big enough deal. But if Alan can, he will try to stop that just in case.
Probably not game ending, but still minus the 30 armor, for example, if Glory also clears the board, would technically put them at parity. I think Alan still comes out on top because Glory's deeper in fatigue and Alan has answers to both the N'Zoth boards, but Singular Brawl doesn't actually clear every single minion, right? It still leaves one up, and sometimes the value runs out for Alan.
Yeah, max tempo now. Doesn't leave any 3 health minions, which I guess makes things a little bit more difficult in terms of immediately drawing the Cthulhu, but with Barov, if you wanted to do it, it's still possible. So many ways.
Rancor. Yeah. Rancor getting the 5/5 down to 3 armor. Yeah, perfect in order to immediately draw that Cthulhu. The one time Alan drew with the Outrider's Axe is to deny South Sea Scoundrel copying Cthulhu from Glory, and now Glory is somewhat forced on the N'Zoth in order to, like, it's not like the Cthulhu is immediately killing him, right? But if the Cthulhu comes down, Glory's responding N'Zoth is not that great either. Maybe you do just play responding N'Zoth so that you actually get value out of the heal from the Light Shower Elemental.
Maybe, but I think Glory here is just finally realizing that his game plan was not going to get there right from the get-go. We know that he's been saving this South Sea Scoundrel to try and copy the Cthulhu, but Alan has given himself an out for the entire game to be able to instantly draw it, and now these South Sea Scoundrels, the crucial card in the matchup that can just make it feel almost unlosable for Priest, have just been completely squandered, and Alan is just going to sail to a win.
Yeah, I mean, Glory's expression says it all, right? He felt like that Scoundrel is going to... I think it looked to him that it was going to get there. But again, if he left any minion, Alan has not just Rancor, right? Barov could get any minion available to the range where he could immediately draw off the Outrider's Axe and delete that possible win condition from Glory that I don't even know if it would have gotten there, a Cthulhu for Glory.
Well, let's see. For Alan now, he still does not have the guaranteed win yet, of course. He still needs to make sure he's not messing up at any point along the way. Ysera Dream is a very strong possibility on this turn, just to deny the Drake for an extra turn. Just slamming Cthulhu is not out of the realm of possibilities either. But he just wants to make sure, I think, that he's getting as much damage from that face as possible.
There's also the interesting thing he could think about of maybe trying to get all of the Ysera spells for or Ysera cards for value, but then you have to think Awakens is pretty useless in this situation. Against the N'Zoth board, you're not killing everything with Awakens, right? And he already has Brawl for that. So essentially he's only losing the Emerald Drake from this deal. And even if Glory replays the the Plague Proto Drake, then Alan is able to just push more damage in the meantime and essentially just forcing Glory onto a spot where he needs to play N'Zoth, at which point Alan can then respond with Brawl, and then he checks to see if there is another N'Zoth, and if there's not, then the Cthulhu can end the game.
Man, it's so interesting because the fact that for Alan it was literally bottom card Cthulhu piece actually worked pretty well for him, weirdly enough, because it meant that there was no possibility that he wouldn't draw Cthulhu immediately, and therefore, of course, Glory had no chance of stealing it. Like, maybe in the average pan-out, Glory's game plan of holding onto the Scoundrel does work for him in testing. I don't want to say that his strategy was wrong necessarily at all, because he could have just got unlucky, again, as I said, with the way that the Cthulhu pieces were stacked in this matchup. But again, it shows at the very least that it's a supremely fallible game plan. It can go very wrong.
That's a very valid point, because if it were, say, bottom 3 cards, Alan rips one immediately, then there's 3 cards in the deck, and then the Scoundrel is still guaranteed to copy Glory a Cthulhu because it's Discover. He has 3 options. But as it happened, Alan gave him no window whatsoever to do that. Cthulhu comes down on empty board now.
Yeah, and he's gonna
Little Drake was just a little bit scary, and then Alan just immediately respected it, even though it took the Ysera from his board, because doesn't want to give Glory any outs for generating dragons.
Yep, and slamming down N'Zoth, I think, is effectively conceding here, because even with all these minions, a very, very impressive N'Zoth indeed, Alan hits end turn and wins the game. So it is going to be Glory taking the loss there. A pretty cool first game, in all honesty. You know, these very long control matchups can be fairly arduous to get through, but I think that one was very, very demonstrative as to how you are supposed to play that matchup, or at the very least, some of the factors at play in these N'Zoth control priests versus Cthulhu control warrior, and how you need to try and meter out your resources.
And I have to definitely eat some of my words at the beginning of the game where I thought it didn't necessarily come down to fatigue. I still think it's reasonable for Alan to draw a couple cards here and there. Not that he's needing to turbo out Cthulhu, but because the pieces are in the deck from the beginning and he does get the South Sea Scoundrels as well to offset, then there are situations where he would end up on drawing cards, but Glory was never really able to put together that pressure, right? We could have seen a different story with early Draconic studies or maybe more impactful raised deads, but again, the way Glory also approached the matchup was not what we expected, right? Holding onto the South Sea Scoundrels, maybe playing it a bit earlier would have put Alan in a bit more awkward situations, but again, we also don't know whether the testing from Glory led him to the conclusion that you should wait for it to give you the chance to get Cthulhu. There's just so many macro decisions that happen at the very beginning of the game that's hard to really fully grasp from just one panel.
I'll be keeping a close eye on this because I think this is a matchup that we will be seeing a lot of, and very interestingly as well, I think we'll be able to change the independent variable on how the control warrior is teched, because whether you go for the Cthulhu version, the N'Zoth version, whether or not you include in the South Sea Scoundrels, how much value versus removal you have in there, I think could tip the scales to be slightly priest favored or slightly warrior favored, and with plenty of control warriors overall this weekend, even though we won't be seeing much priests because I think most players will ban them out the way. At the very least, we'll get a better idea of what the correct way to build control warrior is.
But at least for this first match of the day, we are going to see a bit more priest, you'd have to imagine, because Alan's lineup is built to prey on that one deck. It's not that it doesn't have any game against the rest of Glory's lineup, which I think is the right way to approach target priest, right? If you are in a pack at least, where you're not necessarily sure how the priests are going to be teched, and where, you know, priest is just traditionally a deck that can get under the skin of a lot of your strategies because there's now mutinous in there, and because there's all this random card generation that you can't always play around. I think any decks in a target lineup should still have the ability to not completely fall apart if the priest does manage to sneak a win there. And we've already seen Alan put that Warlock to strong effect, not just in the priest matchup.
Very true. I think the Warlock is in a good spot here for Alan. The part that I slightly question is that mage. We've seen it be, in my opinion, look fairly weak, and I would argue all the burn-based decks versus priest have taken a huge hit since the buff to N'Zoth because they've started playing Light Shower Elemental. And again, even though there are the devolving missiles for the mage against the priest, which can be a very big deal, it's still just means you have to earmark them for exactly that turn, which, unless you've hit the Encounters foe, makes your mana very awkward to get through. I just think that Mage against Priest is not quite so disastrous of a matchup for Priest at all, as we've seen historically. So for Glory, if he has 3 chances to get a win with the Priest, I think at least against the Mage, he's in with a very good shot of getting 1 win, which is all he needs with the deck.
And it's not like he has 0 game against the Warlock, because as we talked about at the top of the show, Mutinous is in the deck now that can sometimes eat Ticketus before it gets corrupted, and that can really mess with Warlock's game plan of trying to beat Priest and Fatigue. And on top of that, the N'Zoth boards are still quite problematic. Alan, I do think, is running the double Twisting Nethers, which essentially function as the double Brawls that he was holding on to for that last game, which act as the insurance against N'Zoth and possible resurrected N'Zoth from Raised Dead. I do think that the Ogre Mancers in here are like not super useful against Priest, because Priest tends to be able to go for Hysteria to clear that board, but definitely have more value than the usual Void Drinkers that we're used to seeing. That's even easier for Priest to answer.
Yeah, it just lowers the possibility overall that you are going to be behind in any way come the mid-game as the Control Warlock, because as long as you are able to survive that, get to your Ticketus, your Jaraxxus, and then your Charge later on. Looking to be in a very good spot. Again, Malagos, the Spellweaver, a card that I've loved included in Control Warlock ever since we first saw it a few weeks ago. I can't remember if it was Eddie that first included it. I don't want to erroneously give credit, but Alan, at least in Asia Pacific, was the first adopter of it. And I think maybe as the weeks go forward with the new 4-mana 2/6 card that Warlock got access to turn your Soul Stealer, yes, exactly, thank you, to turn the cost of your cards from mana to health. Apparently, some testing has been done with Malagos and found some cute synergy there. If you can play Malagos for 0 and then draw your Soul Fragments to heal back up, there's some pretty cool plays that you have access to here. But the Soul Stealer not going to be played this week, as Alan is playing it very, very safe with the controlled Warlock. But even then, given that neither of these players have any new cards, we're just with standard Miracle Rogue, standard control Warlock, which sounds like it's going to be a decidedly less favorable matchup for Alan overall.
Yeah, that's right. I think Alan had this lineup very much having the Priest target in mind. It's not to say that he has 0 chance in other matchups, but he's heavily tech towards Priest, so he will be prepared to take losses against these other decks from Glory, if anything. And Rogue, absolutely nothing new here. I don't think that they got any too powerful tools from the mini set that at least synergize with the current archetype of Rogue that's on top, which is Miracle. And it's traditionally considered a favorable matchup against Warlock because they can get on board in such a way that it's difficult for Warlock to clear everything, because Rogue will not deliberately play into School Spirits. They'll prioritize Mankrik into Kazaka's curves, and then the Jandis can also be a backbreaker. On top of that, the double Wicked Stabs at the top end is burst that Warlock can't often deal with if they haven't drawn exactly Malagos.
Well, here we go. To get things started, definitely liking the look of Spirit Jailer, Scorpid as well. These are cards that just make it awkward for Rogue. They do obviously have access to ways to deal with the Scorpids, but it means they can't just play Mankrik. They can't just play Scorpid. They can't just play Kazakas and hope to ignore it, because otherwise you take these early trades and feel and pull way ahead in the lead. The only question is, I think, for me, whether you're keeping both of them for Coin Scorpid, or if you're looking for some more removal tools instead.
I think the Coin Scorpid game plan is pretty powerful, actually, to deny the things you talked about, the Octobot being the biggest one of them. But my issue with denying Octobot is that if you actually start Spirit Jailer, then you're not necessarily denying Octobot by then going Coin Scorpid. Quite possibly, Alan doesn't necessarily even have just Octobot in mind. He's just saying, I want to curve out. This is powerful against most decks, and if Glory gets his discounts, then let him, because I'm going to have Poison on board.
It's a very good point. Not going to be a factor here, though, because as we were just talking about, it looked like Glory was going to have a very rough time with this Mankrik being poisoned away next turn, but by tempoing out the Foxy Fraud without any battle cry value, it does mean he'll be able to stick the Mankrik next turn, which is a big difference, of course. Does make things a lot easier for him to get ahead.
As for these choices, I'm pretty interested in Drain Soul, just as another single target removal eventually has synergy with Tamsin if he gets it. The Soul Rend is interesting as a way to potentially answer golems from Kazakas, which is traditionally kind of hard for Warlock to get to, but I think the possibility of burning keycards like Militia is a bit scary.
Honestly, I'm low-key looking at Imp Swarm. I know that Rogue has access to removal, but with this kind of a hand, I think it's not ridiculous to assume you'll be in a decent board state come turn 5 or 6 if you're going Ogremancer into the Imp Swarm. Probably still worse than just having guaranteed extra removal and healing. But I think taking a proactive approach in Warlock is something that I've liked a lot over the history of this control deck.
Certainly worth thinking about, but against Rogue, I think if you're not going super proactive, like 2/3/2s is not enough, right? That's just very easily for them to get through. I think proactive in this matchup means slam Militia down on curve, which is absolutely available to Alan if he does draw it, because he has so many Fragment Shufflers. The Og Merchant is pretty useful to protect the Mankrik from second Scorpid, but we see Glory just starting off with Secret Pass, or like hoping to start with Secret Passage.
Yeah, that was definitely a close one. I mean, probably isn't looking at field contact step, but just saving that card in hand and trying to find the Brain Freeze, or almost trying to find the Prize Plunderer, but it's unfortunately just that little bit short of actually being able to clear.
Yeah, kind of awkward here. Just going to throw it down in order to just not top deck it off of when the Secret Passage cards return to hand. I was kind of wondering if that was ever Tenwu to get another Mancrick's Wife in the deck, but Glory may be thinking Tenwu gets better with Alex a little bit later on. This is a matchup where he does have time to go for that combo if nothing gets burned by Ticketus.
Well, that Demonic Studies is looking pretty interesting on this turn, probably after the Spirit Jailer, because you want to bank mana for if you can get Ticketus, for example, for later on. Moarg, though, is a pretty spicy demon to find.
Yeah, that one's interesting. It's not that you can necessarily leave it up against Rogue because they can sometimes abuse it with Brain Freeze, but it's got a lot of synergy with School Spirits. That's just a Flame Strike now. I guess pre-buff Flame Strike.
It's Chaos Nova, I think, is a more apt comparison, but yes. Card draw coming in slowly for Glory, but it's not the kind of hand that you are looking for against Warlock. Admittedly, he does still have some pretty good cards to reduce. Like, if he can get Alexstrasza reduced with Octobot, he could go for a full-on burn game plan. But for now, at least for Alan, is keeping him with some pretty high-pressure plays.
Yeah, I think for Glory, it's been a very, very slow start despite getting Mancrick. He hasn't gotten any of the good follow-up, neither Field Contact or Kazakus, but it's a big deal that he actually copied the Scorpid from Vanessa because that's denying Alan from just slamming down Ogremaster this turn.
Yeah.
And it is kind of painful to deal with at the moment.
A weird turn again, because bump into the Scorpid with his Jailer and then play School Spirits was, in a way, the most tempting play because it sets up for the most likely Ogremaster next turn, but I think it's just too valuable of a card. You know that Rogue is going to go wide, and so saving the School Spirits with the Moarg Artificer, too valuable to just be throwing down.
Yeah, I think Alan is not really in a rush to play the Ogremaster, right? If Glory's not playing big threats, then Alan doesn't need to blink. He's the one who benefits more from the game lasting long as the control in this matchup. Glory finally hitting a heavy hitter here in Kazakus. Stealth definitely looks good, but no copy option, so I guess the draw potentially.
I mean, I was looking down a different route entirely. I was kind of tempted by Poisonous because you might deal 3 to 2 enemies, which was presented, and you could just save it as a reactive Golem. But I think you went down your line of going for Stealth instead, which I guess, given that your card draw has dried up, seems like a valid option for sure.
I mean, I just don't know what Glory needs to react to necessarily. This is the non-Void Drinker list, and he has the Scorpid staying intact for a potential Ogremaster, which Alan is still just not removing. He's not in any rush to play the Ogremaster, just wants to take minimum damage, waiting for Glory to set up something more powerful, at which point he would rip the School Spirits with Moarg combo, but that's crucially still a little bit short of dealing with the Golem.
Very, very big deal. And now for Glory with the Field Contact in hand, his game plan is starting to come together, reducing the Alexstrasza, getting Tenwu at any point would open up huge amounts of damage, given that he could Shadow Step it as well to get it to 0. It's starting to look scary for Alan, as Hysteria is a pretty spicy card to find if he can hit the Golem.
Oh, misses on the 50-50. That's painful. Mancrick's Wife comes out at a very tough time for Alan as well. I also want to say it's kind of unfortunate for Alan to have drawn all these fragments super early, because while he has kept his health topped up, it means that any possible Militia top deck for a big swing is a lot weaker in the near future. But there's the Tenwu now for Glory. There's, oh my gosh, a lot of possible discounts to be had here.
Yeah, this
There's
is a weird
even
turn.
a possibility of stepping the Octobot if he wants to get double discounts.
Oh, that's true. That is interesting. I was looking a little bit more closely, at bouncing the Golem and then Shadow Stepping the Tenwu, because then you get a 0-mana Tenwu, and in combination with an 8-mana Alex, you could go double Tenwu with the Shadow Step for a huge amount of burst.
There's certainly tons of ways of approaching it. Glory, I think going for the most sane game plan of just drawing a big hand and then discounting it all with Field Contact, like the deck is meant to do. What I was talking about with the double discounts on Tenwu Alex would turbo out his combo a turn sooner, but it would crucially reduce his max damage output from 24 to just 16 with only 1 Shadow Step. So I think Glory is fine to wait here. He's also just drawn Wicked Stab now, so he actually just wins next turn.
I mean, he's homing in on lethal very, very quickly here. He's got not 16 on this turn, but very, very close to it.
He can cash in one Wicked Stab now, or even both next turn, saying that, you know, Alan's heal outside of... I guess there's still the Tamsin Drain Soul combo to be a bit wary of, but now there's second Octobot discount, so he can get through basically any breakpoint.
I mean, this is literally just 30 damage from hand, right? With 24, yeah, I mean, it's over 30 damage. There is nothing that Alan can do. He's just lost this game.
Yeah. Everything put in hand, so Ticketus, even if it were in hand here, it's just too late for Alan, and the Cult Neophyte makes it a lot harder for him to do anything, even about just this board.
Yeah, he's you know, playing it out very admirably. He knows he's about to take 1 trillion damage on this turn, but maybe if Alex is bottom card, you can hope that they haven't got the damage together, and then maybe you can burn it with Ticketus, I don't know, something like that in the near future, if you're very, very lucky. But we can see Glory with the full onslaught of Alex Straza Tenwu. This is about as impressive as the combo can possibly get, and you don't see it often, but it truly is a sight to behold.
36 damage with double step on the Tenwu for 3 Alexes played and 2 Wicked Stabs for full damage. Not that he needs all of it, but it's very flashy, which you do have the time to assemble as Rogue in this matchup. Rogue being a very powerful and flexible deck because they have this board-based game plan, and against decks like Warlock, they can go for this if they don't get burned out by Ticketus. It's not something they can often go for against Priest because of Illusia, but every other control deck has to watch out for this Alex Tenwu combo.
And there you have it. Not a whole lot of fun for Alan to sit through, but an expected part of his game plan. When you're bringing Warlock, you know that it's going to have these pretty disastrous matchups against the likes of Miracle Rogue in particular. So you take the L there and move on with your target Priest game plan. Once Glory does go for that N'Zoth Priest again, Alan is looking to have a very, very favorable matchup with this control Warlock, as he is for the most part with his Mage as well. Honestly, with both of his remaining decks, he had a pretty horrible matchup against the Rogue. So with that out of the way, we're looking, of course, at the Priest, but also the Warrior available to Glory, which will be a pretty interesting one to see in action, given that it is Rush Warrior rather than the Control Warrior we've seen from most players.
Oh, thankfully, I don't think I had it in me for like another control mirror, at least because I might be working on Europe a bit later today as well. And this Rush Warrior from Glory is yet again a list shared by the entire Japanese practice group, which is just an archetype that I feel they've kind of disproportionately, at least compared to the rest of the field, have been fans of. Like, when you think powerful archetypes in the meta, you think Priest, you think Rogue, not necessarily Rush Warrior up in there, but it's just traditionally a deck that has a very strong matchup spread when Priest is out of the equation. It's got good matchups against Rogue, against Libram Paladin, that was kind of popular last week, but is not really seeing much play because of the nerfs now, and it has Kresh in it now for a bit more lasting power. No N'Zoth at the top end to like double up on the Kresh, but it's still a powerful card, especially with conditioning.
That's true. Also got Archdruid Naralex as the 3-mana Dormant card, which will be pretty spicy to see, as we do see here, as Glory is going to be queuing up the Rush Warrior next. Naralex in testing is a card that I've seen it do varying amounts of success. I have not been blown away by the card, as some players' initial reactions seem to be. But obviously, a lot of the options that you get off of the Ysera Dream cards are very, very powerful. Curving into Emerald Drake as a 4-mana 7/6 is strong. Ysera Awakens, as often the best option, is a very powerful board clear in control decks. But I will say, I didn't really expect to see it in Rush Warrior, if I'm honest, given a lot of the options feel a little underwhelming.
It's true. I don't think it has necessarily that much synergy with what the deck is trying to do. Like, oftentimes you'll be ahead on board as Rush Warrior and you won't want the Awakens, but I can see potentially just the curve options like you mentioned, and even Laughing Sister becoming a problem. If you can buff them in hand, Laughing Sister can't be targeted, right? What if it becomes a 5/7 from rank 2 conditioning? That's really tough to remove. The Naralex is just kind of also a decent turn 3 curve play, which the Rush Warrior doesn't necessarily have if they have nothing on board, right? They don't necessarily just want to throw down a Playmaker or a Rakara, which have combo value a bit later on. And it kind of takes the place of the curve option of Warmal Challenger, which is cut from this list 2 times over to make room for these new cards.
Yeah, I will say I can't remember exactly what the numbers were, but Control Warlock had a pretty insane matchup against the Rush Warrior, at least based on our statistics in Grandmasters, which I don't think is necessarily reflective of how it goes overall. But it's an extremely different matchup to Miracle Rogue, make no mistake. Despite the fact that there's Alexstrasza in the late game, there is, of course, Troublemaker for a bit of extra damage later on. The fact that they are such a board-focused deck from Glory, and they very often play a few big minions, is exactly what Control Warlock wants to see. It means that Hysteria is incredibly powerful. Going for the Cascading Disaster is very powerful. Even just Siphon Soul can be very strong as well. So I do think that for Alan, this matchup is a lot more palatable. And if he gets the win here, he's looking in a fantastic position to take the series.
That's right. I also want to add that around the time that Control Warlock really gets ramped up with the removal, like twisting Nether into Strongman, is perfect to answer things like Troublemaker that Rush Warrior really want to play on curve. But this opener from Glory is very high pressure. Rakara getting everything out of range of School Spirits is definitely scary, but thankfully for Alan, there is the Hysteria to clear everything up.
Yeah, very, very nicely done. It's a little unfortunate for Glory that he couldn't get either of his minions out of the 3 health range, which is really where Warlock shines, of course, in terms of being able to answer them. But overall, you know, this is just, again, emblematic of how the matchup can go. Warlock just deals with all of Warrior's minions and then very happily sails through to the late game when they start taking over with their own Ticketus, Strongmen, all that goodness. And unless Glory is able to hit Ringmaster Watley, as you'd have to imagine the premier option, this hand is looking a little lackluster already.
Yeah, it's so low value. Even though he gets the conditioning off, it's just 1 or 2 threats per turn, which is well within the range Alan can deal with, especially having picked up the Soul Rend now. Not gonna lie, I was a bit interested by that unstable Fell Ball just because new card, but again, the shape of board that Rush Warrior deals with the Soul Rend is absolutely justifiable. I don't think Alan would be particularly upset about burning cards that might be key in other matchups such as Jiraxis or Militia here, because he can just remove Glory's threats one by one and win the game like that.
So Alan definitely going to be thinking, what kind of cards is he likely to have in hand? Obviously, Watley is almost 100% ruled out, as it would have just been slammed down on this turn. So you are thinking Troublemaker, Alexstrasza, cards like that. So saving the Siphon Soul for bigger individual minions does, I think, carry some amount of merit, because you don't want to just use it on what is only a 3/6 without Wind Fury now. But I was still kind of tempted by it because this Ogremancer is, again, not a super impactful card here.
It really isn't, but I think it does fulfill the purpose of potentially softening the minions on Glory's side of the board. Alan had quite a bit of health to play with here, and that would then make the Hysteria, Soul Rend, School Spirits from Alan a bit more palatable while still holding on to the Siphon Soul. We could go for the Tamsin School Spirits here if he likes, but it's not super clean. It's just going to be the Soul Rend to make sure everything gets swept up. Militia lost, but again, I don't think it's such a big deal in this matchup.
Yeah, that one does sting a little bit. Alan foregoing on the tap. I think correctly realizing this is a hand that has at least one of the two of Troublemaker and Alexstrasza. But Crash being found off the top for Glory is pretty good here, actually, if for nothing else than the 2/5 weapon that will come afterwards that's just more sustained damage.
Yeah, that's pretty big. Fills out Glory's curve really nicely, and Alan can Siphon Soul this if he likes. Honestly, if he Siphon Soul something, I think it's the Gunarg to just save more health on him, but the Hysteria is a lot cleaner here. Well, no matter what spell he used, the relevant part is that he holds on to Twisting Nether for Troublemaker next turn, right? Even if he didn't have the Siphon Soul, that's a way to deal with the board. This, of course, potentially saves him more health, though, because the Scorpion could eat up one of the 3/3s.
Yeah, obviously, Unstable Fellbolt is probably where I'm looking at first of all, just for a bit of extra removal that doesn't damage you. But Fiendish Circle, you know, just to get something on the board in case of another Troublemaker later on, to distract them from going face, does carry some amount of value.
think both have their merits, just not Hellfire because Alan does not have the health to play with. But I think finding a window to get 4 mana played for minion presence is a bit ambitious at this point, so I did favor the Fell Vault as well. Uh-oh, both of them hitting face is a disaster for Alan.
Yeah, it does, of course, force him off of Twisting Nether, as he is going to be very, very afraid of Alexstrasza. Thankfully, Tamsin Rome coming to the rescue here means that he's going to be alive at 1 health for this turn because of the fact that the 3-3 went face, which was pretty disastrous for him. But obviously, Glory is just going to be banking on the fact that there is no removal plus heal on the same turn, which is a pretty good bet to be making, I would say.
Yeah, gets to push that repeated 2 damage from this Turtle Spike, gets Alan within range of Alexstrasza for next turn, and there's only 2 fragments in the deck for Alan right now. He needs one of them in order to stay alive, but that's not it.
So if he goes School Spirit's tap, Unstable Fellbolt could be used to deal with the Samuro, but then there's of course still a Parade Leader, which even as just a 2-1 on the other side of the board is still a pretty rough situation.
He has to draw like 3 fragments in order to offset the damage from the tap and the Parade Leader and get out of range of the Alex, which I don't think is a very likely proposition. I agree it's the only out though if he thinks that Alexstrasza is in hand. At this point for Alan, I think the way he wins this game is to hope that Alex is not the card in hand and then just go Twisting Nether, but Glory has been holding onto this for that long that I think Alan has a strong enough read. Okay, Drain Soul?
That leaves him exactly dead, right?
Yes, that's true. Goes up to 10. Turtle Spike was Alex. Gonna close out the game, and a big sigh of relief from Glory there. Honestly, this is huge, right? Because Glory now gets himself one more chance with Priest to win an unfavorable matchup.
Yeah, that's going to be a tough pill to swallow for Alan, because realistically, he didn't just lose that game because he lost the 25% for one of the 3-3s to attack into Scorpid, but he would probably have been able to stabilize after that point. If he'd just been able to go Twisting Nether straight up to clear that board and not be immediately dead to Alexstrasza, he of course has plenty of ways to heal up in his deck after that fact. And so as you can see here, this was really the defining moment for Alan. The Control Warlock losing again. It's the good matchup left for him, of course, with the Priest, but now he has to win against it twice, which while they are individually, I would argue, favorable matchups, not drastically so, specifically, as I said, with regards to the Mage.
Yeah, if Alan has to win even 2 70%ers, that comes out to less than 50% overall. And I don't think it's as favorable as 70%, especially with regards to the Mage, like you were talking about. Just looking back at that last game, though, I was really impressed to see just how big of an impact the Crush had, because it filled out Glory's 1 dead turn leading up into the Troublemaker and had that persistent weapon damage that meant that Alan, even though he was getting out of range for 1 turn, 2 turns, that incremental damage did put him back in a range where Alex could close out the game. Crush is not to be underestimated even in these more aggressive decks, just to help fill out what is often a lackluster turn 6 from Rush Warrior.
That's right, we're big Crash fans here on the APAC casting desk, and I hope to see much more of the Lord of Turtling in one of the most stupidly and hilariously named cards in a while for many weeks to come. But it is going to be now the Control Warlock against the Priest. Contrary to what we've seen so far, where 1-drops and Scorpids are very good, I think here we're going to see a full mult from Alan, looking for Ticketus, looking for Jiraxxus, just any way to get you that highest percentage chance. Nothing can go wrong. And don't let the Priest outvalue you, out-tempo you, or fatigue you.
Yeah. And traditionally that matchup is all about fatigue, and Alan wins it if he gets Ticketus or multiple Ticketus to go off, which is why Glory should have 2 game plans in mind. One is just being as aggressive as possible. If Alan draws a hand that's all the top end, Jiraxxus, you charge, and none of the Sterias or Cascading Disasters, and sometimes Glory can stick like a huge Sethek and go from there, but it's not always realistic. So the other game plan is to look for Mutinous, I would have to say, in order to eat something like Ticketus or Yasharge.
That's going to be a big deal for Glory if he can snipe one of those cards. Alan, we could have seen the argument for holding on to, well, either of these one-drops, actually, with the Jailer or the Armor Vendor in order to dilute his hand so that there's a less chance of doing that. But I think the argument would be, which I would definitely hear out, he just wants to free up hand space. He can't just tap every turn and not play anything. He needs to free up those cards to make room to find Ticketus and Yashaj, as you said.
He will not know whether or not Glory has Mutinous, but from his perspective, it could happen from any point, turn 7 onward, right? So just to give Glory as little time as possible to go for something like that, getting the Ticketus in the first place and corrupting it and slamming down as soon as possible will be top of the priority. And also these minions give him, you know, some persistent board presence that didn't necessarily help him deal with Sethic, but maybe helps him deal with something like Xyrella a bit later on with Drain Soul.
Definitely like the look of the Feast, because even though a big Sethic is not a likely win condition, they can maybe just buy you some time or disrupt your opponent from just going for the tap, 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 tap game plan without worrying about anything else on their side.
Ogremancer dropped on curve. I don't think Alan expects this to necessarily stick, but again, it's all about just keeping the hand as fluid as possible, keep the card draw going. And as it stands, singular Hysteria is not enough to kill off the Ogremancer, but one spell into Hysteria will be still a little bit short. So it's two
still
spells into Hysteria?
Yeah. It was a weird one there, wasn't it? He could, of course, gone with the Res Sethic and then go for a kind of line with Coin as well. Even just Coin Light Shower was very much worth considering.
Bit interesting. I think Glory is just saying he's fine leaving a 3-3 on board because he's probably just going to play Light Shower next turn, but the Scorpion makes that a less tantalizing proposition. He has second Hysteria to still kill off the Ogremancer one way or another, but Alan will have had plenty of time to keep tapping by then. Although he doesn't tap here.
Yeah, obviously afraid of the...
South Sea Scoundrels?
South Sea Scoundrels, yes, exactly. Sorry, pirates often elude me. Which is a big deal, of course, you know, if they are able to pick anything and then you burn Ticketus. If they're able to find their own Ticketus, maybe, for example, things can go very wrong for you as well. So very wisely done there by Alan, and feeds into that game plan we were talking about, where dumping cards early on, even though it's weak to Mutinous, is important because otherwise he just clogs up his hand and could overdraw one of his key pieces.
It gets into that awkward point where it is really tough to fulfill all the boxes he needs to check, right? Which is draw Ticketus, corrupt Ticketus, stay below 8 cards, and not fall behind on board. Leading up to Alan just tempoing out Strongman, obviously not ideal, but he just needs to get cards out of hand. And there now is the Mutinous. Glory's just gonna slam it.
I think it's a very...
Yeah,
I think it's a very intelligent time to slam it, because your opponent just played uncorrupted Strongman, which I think strongly implies they have Ticketus in hand they're trying to corrupt. Little did we know it would be literally the next card drawn. But Glory, I think, is honestly going to fully expect here Ticketus corrupted to be played out on this turn, because he will have the read that it was there, and that's why he played the Strongman.
Even if it wasn't a perfect read, I still think as soon as you draw Ticketus, if you've seen all these one-drops played, that's pretty much the best time you can play it, because from then on, Alan will be able to like curate his hand in order to play around Mutinous as best as possible. The scary thing now for Alan is that Mutinous is in the Raise Dead pool, so if Glory wants, he can try for another shot at it, and I kind of think that's his best win condition from here.
I agree. I agree completely. He could go for Coin, Raise Dead. Like, he hasn't had many minions die so far, has he?
Yeah. Sethic. But maybe Glory thought, because Ticketus wasn't played last turn, that it wasn't in hand.
Yeah.
But it was top deck, so it can get played now. And Alan's like, it's still pretty good here.
The reads get really, really messy, don't they?
Oh, Glory's gonna see which position in hand this came from and be stressed out to see it. Samuro, South Sea, Condemn, Draconic, that's a big one. Condemn. Okay, as far as burns go, not the most disastrous. The double Condemns are not big deal, but losing the Draconic Studies is pretty big for sure.
What he does get, however, is a Ticketus of his own in the res pool, which I think is pretty close to guaranteed to get hit. It could only have been Mutinous. He finds his own Ticketus. He can even go coin raise dead again immediately and maybe out-Ticketus the Ticketus deck.
That's one way to win this matchup. Oh my goodness. It is a very narrow raised dead pool, like you said. Oh my god! Oh. It wasn't that narrow to the point where I think he would nail double Ticketus, but if it wasn't Ticketus, like, Mutin is still not irrelevant, right? Could still eat something like Yashiraj, but oh my god, I think Glory just wins now. Alan has so many key cards left in the deck, like Jiraxis and Yasharj.
And man, you have to hand it to Glory, because even though we weren't, or his plan to go for Southsea Scoundrel into Cthulhu in the first game of the series did not work out because Alan simply outplayed him in the late game. You have to admit that Glory just always sees these incredibly in-depth lines with this Priest. He knows the deck in these control matchups inside and out, knows exactly what to look for, when to play out his trump cards. And now with double corrupted Ticketus as well, mind you, is the version that he gets. He's just going to delete Alan's deck. There's a good chance that Yasharj is just burned.
Oh my gosh. Alan doesn't know what's coming.
He's not playing on this turn? Okay.
He can still. Oh, okay.
Interesting.
So what this says to me is that, of course, Glory doesn't know what position the cards were shuffled in Alan's deck. From his perspective, like Yasharj or Jiraxis might be in hand.
Yeah.
Maybe he's just trying to get ahead on board with something more persistently threatening, like the Sethic, force Alan onto a removal turn, and get Ticketus down where it's likely to push even more damage.
Well, either way for Alan, I mean, the way I see it, if they haven't played Jiraxis yet, I want to get these Ticketus played as soon as possible just to have the chance to burn it. Again, I mean, I know that every card they draw that isn't Jiraxis makes it more likely that you then burn Jiraxis, so the chances of actually hitting it remain around the same whether you go for it immediately or not. But, I mean, even so, I'd just be scared. I want to get them down right now to manage to play both of them before he's able to draw 4 more cards.
He might also be holding back the information that he's played or he's gotten double Ticketus, because if Alan doesn't know that, then Alan will probably just keep aggressively tapping and getting himself closer to fatigue, at which point the Ticketuses will pull the rug out from under him. I still think that the Ticketus for tempo is still strong, and whether or not Alan has the knowledge, the Ticketus is going to win Glory the game in fatigue in most situations. But it's just interesting to see how greedy he can get with these. One of them finally comes down. Fragment, burned, sheer, jailer, ogre. Oh!
Jiraxis, one final card that changes everything. Glory absolutely ecstatic with his play because he would be coming into this match pretty scared. He's gone against the one player who has the anti-priest strategy. He, of course, like everyone else, has control priest in his lineup. He potentially met his maker in the full anti-priest lineup, but he's managed to, it looks like, get the better of his opponent as Strongman, Malagos. All found. Still no Yasharj, which is the one ray of hope for Alan that he can maybe find enough fatigue of his own to win in the fatigue battle. Maybe.
Oh, but is it a faint ray of hope? Honestly, I'm just shocked that Alan has given us little more than a couple blinks at double Ticketus played against him by Priest. Nothing can phase this man. The Yasharj is safe for now, but I don't think it's gonna get there. Only one Ticketus for him, and so Glory is still just winning in fatigue. Alex, Plague, Proto-Drake, both really powerful.
Yeah, you just want to make it as awkward as possible for when they do go for their Ticketus turn, which to me said Plagued Proto-Drake because it has a Death Rattle effect, so the Cascading Disaster was not quite so potent.
Every time I see Deathwing, I just chuckle a bit because I hear Raven's voice. I hear ravens cheering in my mind.
I don't know. Deathwing's kind of... I mean, you could just play Deathwing here, which I would definitely hear the argument for. But leaving it in hand while you have Elucia, it just means if you do ever have to play Elucia for whatever reason, they can then just go Deathwing to discard most of your own hand. But I guess Elucia is realistically not going to have to be played this game.
Yeah, I think Glory is just waiting to see the Yasharj as the final threat he has to deal with. Not that he even has to necessarily Deathwing to deal with it.
I have no master.
Yeah, just the Blackwing and ping. That was the reason for taking it, you have to imagine.
Finding N'Zoth as well, massive of course, because now Glory can go for his own tempo game plan that I think Alan is going to very heavily struggle with answering.
Alan not playing Ticketus last turn, probably playing around Hysteria there, but we can see Glory has had answers for wide boards, small boards, blue boards, tall boards, whatever. It's just... he has everything in his arsenal and he's not fatiguing because of the double Ticketuses that he played for Alan to fatigue first.
It was just a very, very cool game plan from Glory, and I'm very glad we got to see it in action. Overall, you know, for as much as we lament having to see Priest matches at all, these have been some very exciting ones that Glory has given us. And Alan shuffling through his cards, trying to piece together any kind of a win condition. He has Philosophy into Ticketus, of course, as a double demon played, but even then, if he burns every card left in his opponent's deck, he's still losing.
Yeah, it just comes down to like the value of what's in both players' hands by that point, and we can quite clearly see that Glory's hand has a lot more stuff to do. The Renew regenerates things, N'Zoth is a board in a box, and his hero power is just superior because Alan has no hero power at the moment.
I mean,
Another
more...
studies?
Yeah, this is just more and more value. Ticketus was not given +1/+1 from the Philosophy, so against all odds, doesn't feel like the most impactful.
That's pretty funny. Alan can play the Ticketus and Disaster in order to protect it. Honestly, copying Ticketus is not even that relevant at this point because Glory will have drawn his last card by next turn, so he's not even got anything to burn.
Yeah, it's an 8/8. That's all it is at this point. And Alan knew that when he picked it last turn, just hoping to piece together some kind of value that, of course, can get there.
And the worst part is he can only get 2 minions from Militia maximum because the second he plays a spell to shuffle the fragments in the deck, like the next turn he will draw all those fragments so they won't be in the deck. So he can only go Drain Soul into Elucia or, sorry, School Spirits into Elucia.
So, Ysera Dream, oh no, sorry, it's not a possibility because he's at the full 10 cards, so we would only get Nightmare at the moment. Well, just Deathwing, a possibility if you think you've exhausted most of the removal from your opponent. Glory does, of course, have full information at this point as to what the hand is.
Yeah, and I think you can quite clearly see like the Deathwing can be saved for Elucia plus 2/3/3s and he wins that way, or he could just play it down here because if Elucia gets played for 2/3/3s, it's not killing the 12/12, which then he can stick Apotheosis on. If the 12/12 gets dealt with by Twisting Nether, he can play N'Zoth or Light Shower Elemental. All of these avenues lead to victory.
Oh, the Militia for 3/3, sorry.
Sorry, did I say Elucia?
You did, it's fine.
Militia, Mutinous, oh my god.
Yeah, just you wait till we get to Judgment of Justice Paladin and Shroud of Concealment Rogue. The final vestige of hope for Alan in Ticketus. Again, it does not draw your opponent extra fatigue, it only deletes cards from their deck, which is not going to be enough here now. We could see Ysera into Dream, which does look like it's what Glory is leading up towards.
I I guess Glory was just being as safe as possible to not have any possibility of discarding N'Zoth off of Deathwing, because that could have happened if he played Deathwing earlier. I still think he wins, even if that happens.
Same.
Because he has Light Shower Elemental, but being completely safe, there's nothing wrong with that here. Now he sticks the Sarah, able to Apotheos trade ping at worst.
I mean, he just has lethal, right? With refreshing the hero power and nightmare as well. If not, it's incredibly close. And I think Glory has realized he's found the lethal here, assuming he counted correctly.
Yeah, good spot from you both. Big thumbs up from Glory. Honestly, he already showed his victory stance many turns ago when he went to Axis, right? I think very good understanding of the matchup. And while we were talking about the possibility to raise that Mutinous, that was not a guaranteed way of burning Ticketus, even if he got the Mutinous off of Raised Dead. And so he was going a bit more ambitious of, let me wait one more turn. If the Ticketus is played, I'm going to add only one more minion to my Raised Dead pool with the Soul Mirror, and then have 2 chances at getting Ticketus itself, which honestly not only offset the fatigue game plan, it gave Glory a ton of tempo as well, and left Alan no chance of being able to win in the late game.
Absolutely right. A sick game indeed, one that was a delight to watch, and a worthy series of our current world champion Glory. Even though that first game, I think he'll be going back to the drawing board, having a word with Alutemu and Possessi as to whether there was any alternate game plan he should have gone for. Maybe going for the double South Sea Scoundrel in one turn to burn a Cthulhu piece was better than trying to steal Cthulhu itself from his opponent. Either way, with some very, very clean play to close things out in this with the Priest against the Warlock. He is going to be advancing through to face Possessi. So maybe Possessi won't be giving him the tips of to how to improve his matchup, because he now has to beat Glory if he wants to go through to the semi-finals. Possessi was, of course, as we've said already a couple times, given a free win because of his first place finish